On every continent, planet Earth is losing species at an alarming rate. Some experts say we are heading for what is known as an extinction event, and that it's critical people start to understand the implications.
Over the next 50 years, there's going to be precipitous drops in biodiversity. There's going to be huge numbers of extinctions.
This is a man-made process. This is not like the 90% that went extinct before we arrived. This is what we're doing now with our behaviors.
We need some sort of institution that will help people treasure and cherish the wilderness more than we have today.
What kind of institution would that be? The closest thing we have is the one place that city dwellers can go to connect with the idea of the wild: the zoo.
I have to say this is the most exciting experience I have at the zoo, when we have lots of kids in the polar passage and one of the bears jumps in. They see how spectacular the world of nature is. We think we can do some serious good in terms of helping people understand environmental issues with the help of the bears and the seals and other animals.
Well, maybe, but maybe not.
You have to ask yourself, what are they delivering? Are they delivering conservation? Are they delivering education? Are they a good use of resources, money, time, effort? Are they delivering research which will really protect and conserve species in their natural habitat?
Zoos are no longer a sideshow. Zoos used to be where you have one example of every animal, boom, 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 small cages, one after another, going down like an assembly line of seeing animals in cages. It's not the way it is anymore. Now you walk through a good zoo and you're seeing animals exhibited in environments. You're walking through Africa, you're walking through Asia, the animals are from Asia. You don't see just giraffes on an exhibit, you see giraffes on an exhibit with zebras. The evolution of a zoo is evolving now to understand that animals have needs, and those needs have to be met.
How can we be intelligent and yet accept the fact that we can bring animals, put them in captivity so people can come and look at them?
We love animals, but we go to the zoo, and zoos are basically animal prisons.
What is the tragedy of urban people becoming disconnected from animals, never getting to see them, never getting to know them? If the only animal you ever knew was a seagull and a rat, what decisions would you take? Zoos offer a safe way for a multitude of people to very quickly see animals they would never otherwise get to see.
Most people will not have the opportunity to travel to Africa to see an elephant, to travel to Asia to see a tiger, to travel to South America to see a tapir.
Well, I'm sorry, the world isn't designed so it's convenient. It's not McDonald's of animals where you can go and get a hamburger and see a tiger.
Hi, tiger.
How can that be the right way for us as a species to behave? How can that be the right message to send to our children?
And yet hundreds of millions of people in cities and towns all over the world flock to zoos every year. Zookeepers will tell you why.
Zoos are places where human beings are falling in love with animals. An old wisdom from Kenya says, we only will protect what we love, and we only will love what we know. And zoos are the places we learn about animals and we learn about nature.
Who is you? Who is you?
This is the Oak Lawn Farm Zoo in rural Nova Scotia. Early in the season, on a holiday weekend like this, it might attract 1,000 or so visitors. People like to bring their kids in to meet the animals. They'll see primates and llamas and some pretty impressive big cats.
He's just about 9 months old. Hello, Toops. You're a good boy. Hello, baby. Hello, how are you? How's the baby girl? How's the baby girl?
It's a mom and pop kind of operation. You can find small zoos like this all over North America. In fact, around the world. And much, much bigger ones in every country, in every major city. In all, there are 10,000 zoos worldwide. from accredited big city zoos to safari parks to unaccredited roadside attractions. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar industry, attracting an incredible 700 million visitors a year. In North America, zoos attract more paying customers than all the major sports franchises combined.
Zoos, in some form or other, have been around as long as we've had civilization. Nearly 5,000 years ago in Egypt, there's evidence that there was a zoo there.
David Hancox has first-hand experience running a big city zoo. Now he's a writer, a zoo historian and critic, a renowned expert on the subject of zoos and the ancient bond between people and nature.
That fascination that we have is not necessarily a good thing for the animals. It's not really the best of worlds to be loved by a human being. We have this peculiar confliction of wanting to almost worship nature and at the same time wanting to dominate it and to control it. Zoos reveal both the best and the worst of that human condition.
Throughout history, humans have kept animals for various reasons. For food, for companionship, and for entertainment. It was the Victorians who first promoted the idea of zoos as a place for scientific study. They assembled huge collections of exotic animals from distant corners of an empire on which the sun never set.
Well, I think one of the most revealing things about the history of zoos is that about the time that they opened to the public was the time that places like the Royal Bethlehem Hospital in London closed. That basically was almost a freak show, a mental asylum where the public could come and look at the inmates, and if you paid extra, you could throw food or even better, throw some alcohol to the deranged people, and that was the entertainment. That closed at the same time that London and some of the other zoos opened to the public.
The first public zoos that emerged early in the 19th century were faced with problems that they hadn't come across before, and that was, how do you keep these animals alive? They didn't even know what they fed them on. They would give fruitcake and custard to gorillas.
You leapfrog forward a couple hundred years, one hopes that a zoo is really more of a sanctuary, that it's gone through several iterations in that evolutionary period, but now it's a healthy place for animals and a healthy place for people.
Sounds reasonable, and lots of zoogoers would agree. But even with all the changes zoos have made over the years, removing the old bars and metal cages, a fundamental fact remains.
Zoos are places for people, and they're for places for people to go at their convenience to see animals. They're difficult places to design because you have three clients. You have the animals. You have the keepers.
Hi, honey.
And you have the visitors.
Move the camera. Hey, he's wrestling an alligator.
If there are compromises to be made, it's invariably the animals that are expected to make the compromise.
Zoos rarely take animals from the wild anymore. A zoo lion is not a wild lion. These days, almost all zoo animals are born in captivity. Zoos maintain a database of breeding stock, and animals are shipped around the world to maintain genetic diversity.
This tells me that there's 1,000 elephants in zoos around the world. 228 zoos are holding elephants. We've got Melbourne Zoo, and it shows that we have 8 elephants, 3 males and 5 females.
Many zoos, like Detroit, have taken in exotic animals rescued from abuse or neglect.
So do you know that bear's name? His name is Nuka. His name, oh, he's right there. His name is Nuka.
And 5 years ago, zoo director Ron Kagan took the controversial decision to get rid of his zoo's elephants. He believed the zoo could not meet the elephants' essential needs, that they'd be better off in an elephant sanctuary in California. After months of bitter debate, Toronto Zoo has made the same decision about their elephants.
I'm convinced there is a way to have a humane zoo. We cannot have zoos unless they are humane. People talk a lot about comparing life in a zoo to life in the wild, and everyone should know that life in the wild is not a picnic. That is not a justification to put something in captivity. But if you can create a great quality of life for a captive animal, I think that's a terrific thing.
Leipzig Zoo in Germany is smack bang in the middle of the city. In recent times, it was a drab sort of place, an old school zoo. To get ready for a new generation of zoogoers, Leipzig decided to perform a serious makeover. In 2007, work began on a new kind of exhibit. A massive enclosure that would replicate the experience of being in a tropical rainforest. 500 plant and animal species, all housed under one very high-tech roof. Here's the result. They call it Gondwanaland, a kind of zoo of the future. No cages here. Visitors and animals get close under a canopy of tropical vegetation. Jörg Junhold is the zoo's boss and the president of the World Association of Zoos.
A zoo in the 21st century should be a conservation center using animals as ambassadors for conservation of their wild relatives, a nature-like environment for the animals so that the animals feel well, but also that the visitor perception is that these animals are kept in the right environment and that they feel good.
In part, it's public perception and people's expectations that have forced zoos like this one to change. Zoo designers are looking for ways to make exhibits seem humane while also giving visitors a memorable experience.
I personally believe that we need the real event, being close, near animals, feel the heat like here in the tropical rainforest, smell the animals, listen to their voices. This is only possible in the real nature or in a zoo.
Just outside Canterbury in southern England, there's an animal sanctuary with an unusual mission. To let all its animals go free.
I passionately believe that the only reason you can keep animals in captivity is you can breed them properly and then find a way to send as many back as you can.
This is Damien Aspinall, a British multi-millionaire with a passion for animals that runs deep.
Look what I got for you. Look at that. Oh, it's nice, isn't it? Here.
Aspinall's father opened this place in the 1960s. Damien runs it now.
I was very fortunate that in my childhood, my father had many animals living in the house with us. I've got a picture just there when I was 10 years old with a fully grown tiger. It made it difficult having play dates, of course, with school friends. Hello, girl. Hello, sweetheart. Hold on, hold on, hold on. Hold on. Yes, yes, yes. Come on. Yeah, you're a beautiful girl, aren't you? Who are these people? I know. If nature had wanted animals to be in zoos, nature would have put animals in zoos. There we are. You're sure? I think she has as much right to be on this earth as you and I. Probably more.
Aspinall's facility has bred literally hundreds of exotic animals and released them back into the wild. When Aspinall's first daughter was born 25 years ago, some people were shocked when he introduced her to one of his gorillas. He has an unusual relationship with the animals he breeds, no doubt about it. But he has a special love for gorillas.
Come on, people, here. We're the only people to have reintroduced gorillas back into the wild, over 50. Another 11 going this year. I haven't got anything, Kifu. I haven't got anything. I haven't got anything. I haven't got anything. I haven't got anything. Hey, come on. Humans let you down. Where are we going? Where are you taking me? But a friendship with an animal very rarely lets you down.
I know, you're a sweet boy, aren't you? You're a sweet boy.
If Aspinall had his way, all the world's conventional zoos would be closed forever.
It's all down to whether you think we have the right, as a human, to take an animal out of the wild, put it in a concrete pen, keep it out of its natural circumstances and away from its family so kids can come and look at it. We should be sending our children to zoos and say, this is wrong. This is where we failed as a species. This is what's so wrong with us. Aren't we supposed to be the intelligent one? I mean, just imagine aliens were out there and they were picking up our kids and picking up people here and putting them on display because they wanted to educate all the people out in outer space. We'd think it was an outrage. I mean, it's hypocrisy.
To say that we're going to close zoos or we should try to close zoos is like whistling in the wind. It's a grand ambition, but it's a futile one. What we need to do is find ways to make zoos useful. And I think that they have the potential to be extraordinarily useful.
Useful how? Here at the zoo in Atlanta, they are big on the two things contemporary zoos say they are all about: education and conservation.
The female, she's raised all of the animals in this exhibit.
This is Lori Perkins. She's an expert on all things orangutan. Perkins heads up the orangutan breeding program that coordinates the efforts of all zoos in North America. She's heard the argument that big city zoos have outlived their usefulness, and she doesn't buy it.
Good job, buddy. Zoos were less useful and less justifiable in the past. I think we've become more relevant and more useful, in part because people have no connection to animals, even in their own environment. You know, it's funny, we see kids come to the zoo that'll be fascinated by the squirrel because they live in such a artificial, concrete, video game world that they really just don't have any connection to nature and to wildlife.
It's to get them away from all the technical everything and playing tablets and on the computer and expose them to some wildlife and nature and get them out in the fresh air for a while. Yeah.
Some animals. Thank you.
Monkey.
Bears. What about you, Anna?
Tigers.
We really enjoyed it. We like the penguins the best.
The penguins, they were swimming under the water and we could see them through the windows.
I think it's good for city dwellers to be able to see a bit more of nature. Yeah, you agree, don't you?
In the wild, orangutans are critically endangered, mostly because of habitat destruction by humans. The challenge zoos are taking on more and more is to make people care.
Would you even know about orangutans if you hadn't been to a zoo, to see them, hear them, smell them, in some cases touch them? I think that really builds that connection. We can present these animals as ambassadors.
This idea of zoo animals as ambassadors for their wild cousins is an important concept. You'll hear it over and over again the more zoos you visit. But that doesn't mean everyone buys into it.
If we've got 700 million visitors a year going to the zoos around the world, and if zoos are creating people that are concerned and passionate about conservation, where are all these conservationists? Why don't I see them?
So, what do we really learn at the zoo?
Yep. This is Yamakuna, who's a 2-year-old female platypus. So she's about the equivalent of a teenager. She's still quite young.
That is a platypus.
Yeah, it is a platypus. And as you can see, she's pretty playful. Most platypuses are actually quite playful, but not many people get to see it because they're nocturnal. Oh, okay. Scratch yourself.
A delightful summer outing to the zoo with human youngsters meeting animal youngsters. What could be more pleasant?
Nobody doubts that zoos have changed in the past 50 years. By and large, people have become more sensitive to animal welfare issues. These days, opposition to zoos is organized in a way it wasn't a generation ago.
African Lion Safari's 44th year began with roughly 40 protesters.
Profit first and animals last, when it should be animals first and profits last.
Most big city zoos have started to clean up their act and their image.
Having started working in the zoo 33 years ago, I've seen a tremendous change. I don't believe that seeing an elephant on a concrete floor in a tiny 200 by 100 exhibit is a natural way to see an elephant. However, if you can exhibit elephants together as a group in an open area, in a natural environment, and you can plant a baobab tree like we have here at the zoo, we have to teach people not necessarily just about the animal, but about the environment.
Zoos will contort themselves to avoid using the word cage. They don't use the word enclosure. They don't like referring to the fact even that they have animals that are in captivity. And so what they talk now is that the animal's in its habitat.
We have a cageless zoo, so to speak. You really don't see bars, you don't see concrete floors. We have animals in open areas, again, exhibited in social groups that are designed to support the animal's natural lifestyle.
Although the bars have now been removed, nothing has been improved from the animal's point of view. The animals came out of their cage each morning into that space. Nothing at all was different from the way it was yesterday, the week before, the year before, the year following. And that's the case with almost all zoo habitats today.
Still, zoos everywhere will argue that these modern types of enclosures work for people and the animals.
Good girl. What's your impression when you come up and look at a giraffe face to face like that? What kind of impression does that make with you?
It's got a really long tongue.
It does, right? You didn't know that before, huh?
For McGill, the whole point is that word we've heard before, connection.
I know when I grew up as a boy in New York City, it was my exposure going to the Bronx Zoo, seeing an animal face to face. When you look at an animal face to face, there is a connection there. It's a very strong connection that can't be duplicated in any other sense.
So, do zoos really educate us in a unique way? Not so much, says the Canadian director of Zoo Check, a charity devoted to animal protection.
While zoos claim to be educational, and I've never met a zoo director or seen zoo literature anywhere in the world that didn't claim to be educational. But if you look at the peer-reviewed literature, if you look at what's out there, which most people don't, but if you look at all that, you'll find that there is no body of empirical evidence supporting this idea that people are educated.
Very long tongue, about 40 centimetres long. It's black so it doesn't get sunburnt when they're out.
90% of zoo visitors are casual visitors. They go to the zoo for a nice day out. Usually it's families with kids. And they go from one exhibit to the next, and if the animals aren't doing anything, they move on very quickly. We had university students sample 300 to 500 people looking at animals. They found that some of the monkeys was an average of about 34, 35 seconds. For zebras, about the same. For elephants, one of the biggest, most charismatic animals that everybody wants to see, it was an average of 77 seconds. So people aren't looking at animals very long at all. It's a very much a TV clicker attitude. Oh, nothing going on, let's go on to the next one. And in fact, the kids are usually running off to the next exhibit and the next and the next. There's no proof that casual visitors actually learn anything.
Browse is another term for branches. That big.
The boy, he's 2.5, and then Sanuk is only 2 months. And Marley's the one with the wiggly tail, and they like interacting with each other.
Meet Jenny Gray. Originally from South Africa, she's now the CEO of Zoos Victoria, 3 separate but interconnected zoos in and around Melbourne, Australia. In her mind, modern zoos have a new and urgent mission: to conserve species at risk. Part of that involves educating zoo visitors about what humans are doing to wild habitat.
We've got Rigo, he's our silverback here. He's in a breeding group with 5 females.
Gorillas are in trouble in the wild, in part because of habitat destruction. It's all to do with the mining in Central Africa of a substance called coltan, used in most electronic communication devices. The miners move into the forests and kill gorillas for so-called bushmeat. It's to the point now where in many places, gorillas are critically endangered.
Simple thing we can all do is recycle our mobile phones. If we recycle our electronic devices, our phones, we then don't make as many new ones. We also don't need the ingredients. Simple things we can do at home that would help these guys.
Zoos Victoria also has a campaign to get people to switch to toilet paper made from recycled materials. These are targeted initiatives focusing on very specific ideas, but Gray says there's a much, much bigger idea in play.
In Johannesburg Zoo, the vast majority of children that came through our zoo were disadvantaged children from townships. Our goal was to give these kids the best day of their life, to help them forget that they lived in a township. There was one place that I knew I could stand and wait for the kids. And it was the point they would come around a corner and see elephants for the first time. And as they got to that corner, they would all just stop dead. And collectively, they'd breathe in. They'd all just go, and then they'd scream, "Elephant!" And then they'd dance, and they'd sing, and they'd clap. Overcome with the joy of being in the presence of a magnificent animal. Overcome with that joy. And one of those kids may grow up to be the Minister for Environment. We need to give every child the chance to become overcome with joy and wonder that the beauty of this world can provide.
This thing that people say where you can't get kids to love animals unless they can see them, it's not true.
Will Travers runs the Born Free Foundation in the UK. He grew up in a family that dedicated their lives to the welfare of animals in the wild. His mother and father were the lead actors in the 1966 movie Born Free. Travers says the whole zoo animals as ambassadors concept is deeply flawed.
There are no great whales in captivity. There are no great whales in captivity. And yet one of the biggest movements in the world is the protection of great whales in their natural habitat. You can encourage kids, society as a whole, to become engaged in and concerned about the welfare and future of species, and you do not have to do it by incarcerating thousands, millions of animals in zoos around the world.
Imprisonment may sound harsh, but it's not hard to find examples of prison-like conditions. This facility in Florida, where photography is strictly forbidden, keeps animals of all kinds in small, cramped pens. This tiger lives in what amounts to a doghouse. Black bears are solitary and need lots of space. Not here. At the end of the tour, you can line up to see baby tigers. For $250, you can swim with one in a pool.
I've been to about 1,000 different institutions around the world. I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, what's out there in all these different countries. If you go to India, if you go to Japan, if you go to Korea, if you go to Africa, if you go to Brazil, you can go all over the United States and even here in Canada. You will find animals that are in prison-type conditions. There's no way else to describe them. Now, that's not to say that some animals aren't in decent conditions. But if you look in totality at the industry on a global basis, it's abysmal, and you would be hard-pressed to say that they are anything but prisons.
There are zoos and zoos.
Jane Goodall's an amazing woman. She's 72 years old, and she travels the whole world talking about primates. It's almost inconceivable to think of the bravery of this really young, beautiful woman who went out to Africa and sat and stared through the bushes looking at chimpanzees.
I don't like zoos. I'd much rather see animals in the wild. But the way things are today, we have zoos, we have animals in the zoos, we can't put them back in the wild. Sometimes there's no wild to put them back into. So we best do the best job we can. There are zoos which never should have been started, not only in some of the developing countries, but sadly in very civilized nations. You get animals in zoos treated abominably. But there are zoos which really do get it. There are zoos which are doing a lot of work on trying to protect animals in the wild. They're trying to educate people into the importance of conserving animals in the wild, and there's a whole school of environmental enrichment, which actually I think I began with chimpanzees back in 1960, but it's now spread to all kinds of other animals, and people realize that an animal sitting in a cage with nothing to do by itself is a form of cruelty.
I can see the argument that it might be cruel to keep animals in cages, but I think they're really important places to educate us about what our world is, and this is just a small part of it.
It's not ideal having animals in cages, but you've got to fund the projects, and these places do that, and I think they do an lot more good than they do harm.
Yeah.
An awful lot more.
I found it a little bit depressing, actually. Animals are in such small cages and they all look so sad, just going round and round in circles.
Enclosures were just sort of bare dead wood and mud, and they didn't, the animals weren't thriving exactly.
I think it's quite reasonable because not everyone can afford or anything to go abroad and see the animals, so I think it's fair that they're here.
The pyramids are in Egypt. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is in Italy. It does not come to your hometown. It is where it is. Polar bears live in the high Arctic. Elephants live in Africa or Asia. Lions live on the plains of the Serengeti. They do not live in downtown Toronto or downtown New York or London or anywhere else for that matter. And it really is a question of re-educating ourselves.
In a zoo, you can smell the animal. And I think most important of all, you can look into the eyes. And the number of people who've told me, out of the blue, they've come up to me after lectures and said, I looked into that gorilla's eyes, or I looked into the chimpanzee's eyes, or I looked into an elephant's eyes, and I'll never be the same again.
In southern Australia, the state of Victoria has a big problem with its animal population. Not the domesticated kind, but the wildlife. In fact, in the last 200 years, about half of all mammal extinctions on the planet have happened in Australia. This place, a branch of Zoos Victoria, specializes in Australian animals. The staff here have made a vow that on their watch, not one endangered local species will be allowed to die out. Like this one, the mountain pygmy possum. In many places, almost gone.
There's less than 50 of these
left in the wild in one of its populations. We can actually breed it up and release possums back onto the mountain and save it from extinction.
Okay, well, this is a little eastern barred bandicoot, and this is a native marsupial. Around about 1990, they were declared extinct in the wild. Things like agriculture, development had taken away all their grasslands. We've established a breeding program for these guys with the hope of one day reintroducing them to the wild. It'd be devastating for me to see these guys go extinct purely because of us.
This is a helmeted honeyeater. We work with helmeted honeyeaters here at Hillsville Sanctuary because they're a critically endangered species. I believe zoos can save species from extinction, and I think the helmeted honeyeater is a really good example of that, where if it wasn't for the work that zoos have done with the captive breeding program, these birds wouldn't exist. In the wild, they didn't have enough habitat or enough numbers to keep a healthy population going.
Not that long ago, zoos weren't as focused on conservation issues as they are now. Preserving species has become a mantra in the zoo industry, but there are still losses. A recent loss is a tiny bat that used to populate Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean. Zoos Victoria got the call in 2009, but it was too late. One single bat was left.
This is the recording that I made of the bat 6 days before it died. It's flying around, it's eating. You know, this is its voice of the last bat of this species. And that's it. I mean, that's all we've got left.
We're now losing species, it's estimated, at 27,000 a year. That's the current rate. I mean, it's shooting up. It's like a ladder. Things are built on top of each other. And if something starts collapsing at the bottom, I don't know what happens.
Here's a rung on the ladder, a young stick insect. It's indigenous to just one place, Lord Howe Island off Australia's east coast. In 1918, a ship weighed anchor. The humans who went ashore were joined by some of the ship's rats. Those rats ate every last stick insect on the island. In 1960, the species was officially declared extinct. Then, in 2001, on a nearby rock named Ball's Pyramid, a team from the zoo miraculously found a small cluster of surviving insects. This is what the adult insect looks like, back from the very brink of extinction. The zoo here in Melbourne has now bred 10,000 of these insects. The plan is to get rid of the rats and then repopulate Lord Howe Island with its unique stick insects to repair the damage that was done 100 years ago. From the blood-curdling noise they make, you'd think the Tasmanian devil was one tough customer. In fact, the devil is in big trouble.
Not only are they cute, ferocious, and mean, they're also suffering from a very rare disease, a contagious cancer.
There is a real chance that devils will be wiped out in the wild. So the zoo here is part of a massive program to breed a backup population, just in case.
The biggest challenge is just the scale of the problem, to prioritize and choose which animals are you going to help save. I think many zoos almost become paralyzed by that thought of what do we work with? Can we really help save the Sumatran rhino when there's only 40 left in the wild?
There are more zoos coming to the recognition that they can't be this Noah's Ark, that the number of animals they have and the inbreeding that's happened, the amount of space they need to keep the animals in numbers that would save them from extinction just isn't there.
Then you look on the other end of the scale, there's little tiny frogs that are suffering from chytrid fungus. We can help them, because to have a room full of frogs that are breeding and put them back into the wild, that only costs a couple of $100,000 a year, whereas to save rhinos is going to cost millions of dollars a year.
That's the issue. Saving species is a massive undertaking costing untold billions of dollars. And the real debate is about where the money should be spent. In the wild or In zoos, the closest thing to the wild most regular folks get is a drive through a safari park like this one in Werribee, near Melbourne.
Public that come out here, they love it. The main reason they love it is because we do have the mixed species and also because they've got the space.
Lance Weldhagen works here. He's passionate about his favorites, the white rhinos. He hopes that visitors will learn about the threat of extinction faced by rhinos in the wild.
Bit too close for my liking. At least they breed relatively well in a captive situation, the whites. The Asian species, you may as well kiss them goodbye. The northern white rhino, that's pretty much gone. There's 6 left. That's finished. You can't come back from that. Yeah. Humans are just...
If we're going to save life on Earth, it is not going to be because of zoos. Life on Earth will be conserved when we put our time and our effort into conserving what's left of the natural world and not taking our eye off the ball and putting the resources we do into zoos.
I think it's naive to say, stop spending money on zoos and spend it in the wild. It's not the same money. The people who come to our zoos are passionate about animals. Certainly they pay money to come through the gates and that funds our operations. But would they just as likely send the money off to Africa to save lions in the wild? No, they come here because they want to share these experiences with their children and they want to share their value system with their children. They can do that right here in our zoos. And that's why it's worth spending the money.
And then there's the money spent on pandas.
I am truly delighted to officially welcome to Canada a pair of China's national treasures, Arshun and Damao.
China has been sending pandas to other countries for diplomatic reasons for more than 1,000 years. In the 1970s, when the USA and China renewed a friendly relationship, the practice became known as panda diplomacy. Essentially, selected zoos can rent pandas from China. And at $1 million a year, they don't come cheap.
The amount of money that's been wasted on them is huge. If you talk to the people in the States who brought in pandas expecting that what it would do is bump up their revenue, they say, don't go there. The numbers simply don't add up.
They're so cute. They're adorable.
They're awesome. I love pandas. So it's actually great that they're in Canada.
I would say to those people in Canada, turn it down, switch it off. You're not really helping pandas by having pandas shuttled around the world like so many pieces of diplomatic jewelry. It's a huge mistake.
Bubbles! 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 Give me a spot!
In a perfect world, I wouldn't want to have a zoo either. In a perfect world, we'd have wild areas that would be protected forever, and we know those animals could always be found there. We don't live there. We need to have institutions like good zoos that help counteract that help teach people how we need to protect those environments.
I think there's a role for sanctuaries. I think there's a role for legitimate conservation breeding centers. There is a role possibly for animals in some kinds of educational institutions. But I think that zoos generally, they have to change. They're not productive, they're not humane, they're not serving the purpose that many people think they are.
So, what is the future of the zoo?
Can anybody tell me what this one is?
She's a golden eagle.
She's a golden eagle. We get 2 species of eagles here in British Columbia. Who can tell me what the other one is?
Like zoos everywhere, the Greater Vancouver Zoo goes out of its way to provide educational programs. It's good for business, but there's a bigger reason too.
If you guys can get really close to animals and understand them a little bit more, you'll actually protect what they need most in the wild.
The only tools we've got to help them understand all that, because people no longer have daily contact with the natural world, are zoos and botanic gardens and aquariums. And they each deal with isolated, separate fragments of the natural world. Zoos, I think, are the only ones that can evolve into this new type of institution that's needed, where we can be talking about a holistic view of nature.
In many places, zoo designers are working on new concepts. Places where the needs of the animals are a higher priority than ever, and the focus is on the connection between those animals and the visitors.
And this is going to be a very dramatic area.
I think that is going to be very breathtaking for people.
In some zoos today, animal research includes apes interacting with touchscreen computers. There's talk of cloning extinct species such as the woolly mammoth. Designers are experimenting with robotic animals, and in Holland, they're about to open a zoo dedicated to microbes, the very building blocks of life.
So there has to be a much bigger outcome to a zoo experience than simply being able to say, I saw a zebra. If you come away from that experience being a better citizen, I don't mean political citizen, I mean citizen of the planet, I think that's a great value that zoos serve. If it's simply a visual record, I don't think that's legitimate.
Our visiting public, that's our commodity. That's our contribution to the conservation game. And if we just let them passively walk through here and leave without having gotten a message, we've failed in that.
We are never going to get to a point where we say, that's it, we're done, we're perfect, we don't need to do anything more.
My belief is that animals would be better off without zoos. You know, I think that belief is shared each year by an ever-increasing number of people. Hopefully that perspective will impact on how zoos evolve and make them better than they are today.
We are the same industry as the industry that had the Victorian parks. It's the exact same industry. We've just grown over time, just like anything else grows over time.
In theory, better citizens of the planet will know more and care more about the disappearance of wild habitat, more about extinction, more about the urgency of the problems faced by so many of the Earth's species on every continent.
If we don't conserve wildlife in its natural habitat, in all its diversity, and we do just end up with animals in zoos, when that animal stares back, I suspect it will be there to constantly remind us that we really, really missed an incredibly important opportunity, and we got distracted into thinking that zoos were part of the answer, when frankly I think zoos are part of the problem.
Een fijne jongen, hé. Een fijn, hè? Een fijne jongen, hè? Joh. Een fijn, mama.
We are at a sort of turning point in so many ways today. And if we take the wrong turning, there won't be any zoos, there'll be nothing much left in the wild, and humans will be living in a pretty terrible situation.